The river wore mourning like a pale veil. Mists clung low to the reeds and hummocks, and the lowlands hummed with the sound of insects that had outlasted summer and did not yet believe in winter. A lone rider came along the towpath at a patient walk, the hooves of his gray mare thudding softly into damp turf. He kept to the shade where willow branches drooped, glancing from habit into every ruffle of fog, every swirl and eddy where water lapped a root. He had the look of a man who observed the work of the world as if measuring it, the way a mason sighted a wall or a bowyer tested the grain in you. Wind slid along the river on an eastward breath, bringing the faintest flavors: silt, old fish, char from distant cook-fires. At a turn of the towpath, the rider halted and stood a moment in his stirrups to peer across the flat, drowned fields. The castle came clear in its time. The red sandstone towers, the triangular keep at the fork of forking waters, and the pennants belling lazily from the battlements. Blue and red trout rippled there, and above them a new-stitched banner streamed, the white wolf's head grinning, rough-hemmed and proud. Between walls and river, tents had sprouted like mushrooms after rain, bright cloth and dull, patched and clean, thick as sheep across the meadows. The rider took it in without haste. He leaned forward and patted the mare's warm neck. "Not far now, morning," he said, the name quiet on his tongue, and the mare turned an ear to him. A pike set itself before his breastbone like an accusation, not out of fog, but from behind a thorn hedge where a boy in a mailed shirt had been crouched as still as a woodcock. "Hold there," the boy croaked. He could not have been more than 16. His hands showed raw beneath the gauntlets where the straps bit. "Name your name and business." The rider regarded him, not the pike. He saw the boy was thin with growth, long limbs not filled in, and the mouth had not yet learned contempt. He lifted his hands from the reins to show them empty. "I am Herod," he said, after a fractional pause that belonged to a habit of old. "A knight. I've come to put my sword at Robb Stark's service, if he'll have it." "Será Roth." The boy made the honorific smaller with the shake in his throat, and again with how tightly he kept hold of the vernacular pike. "You'll follow to the marshal's tent. No wandering, no stepping off the path. If you so much as—" He swallowed. "If you try running, I'll shout." "That would be wise," the rider said. He did not smile. They went along together, the boy's pike point never far from the rider's shoulder, though it began to droop as they passed among the outermost tents, and men rose yawning from bedrolls, tugged on boots, shivered, stretched, cursed the damp, hawked phlegm into the grass. The camp smelled of smoke and wool, horse and man, boiled grain, and latrines. Cooks hustled at summer-dented pots. One woman stood at a washtub with her arms sunk to the elbow, the water gray and steaming, a knot of girls around her saying nothing at all. The rider saw a tent that patched a breach with sailcloth. A cuirass hung to dry beside a child's small shirt, a mountain of apples on a cloak spread for barter. He saw more men than gold could keep fed through a long winter, and that, too, he measured. They came at last to a pen and spear outside a tent stitched from two kinds of canvas. One dyed deep as river clay, the other sun-gnawed and pale. The guard at the tent flap had a scar like a hook at the corner of his eye and carried himself with the easy readiness of a man not long out of fighting. At the sight of the boy with his pike held too earnest and the rider with his blank expression, he raised his brows. "What's this, then, Sir Herod?" the boy said in a rush. "Come to give his sword to the king in the north." In the saying, some of the words gained weight and steadied him. The guard's look reassessed the rider with a flicker. "You're a bit long in the tooth for glory," he said, not unkindly. "Your harness is good leather, though. Your saddle's as well kept as a master's wife, and you sit it as if you and it were wed. Let him in." "His pike." "Your oath to shout will save us all," said the guard. He opened the flap. Inside, the heat of coals pressed against the cool of morning. A man bent over a map, tracing a line with one thick finger. He was tall and broad, and his beard was as red as iron left to weather. His mouth was a scarred arrangement of lines too wide for dignity, made for bellowing in victory and laughter in defeat. But his blue eyes were very clear. Two other men flanked him, one sallow, one spare. A woman sat 3 paces off with a needle and thread in her hands and a strip of cloth wound over one palm. She looked up first. "You're late to this war, sire?" the red-bearded man said, not looking up yet. "Gates to the south are watched. If you've come to sell yourself to the Lannisters, you can turn your horse now and be less a fool." The rider inclined his head. "I've not sold myself, my lord, and I've no taste for gold that stinks of children's blood." The map man glanced up at that. A shadow of approval moved in his beard. "I am the great John Umber," he said, and laughed when the boy with the pike flinched. "If you mean to prize words from my mouth, you'll find them there." "Your name?" "Herod," the rider said. "There's no Herod in my memory," the great John said. "Where's your banner? Whose man were you before you became no man's?" "Some men carry their banners only in their blood," the woman said. Her needle brightened and dimmed as it passed through cloth. "And you do not always need a cloth to tell you when you are in the presence of a fighting man, uncle. Some men carry them in their tongues, Lady Caitlin," the great John returned. "And those banners flap just as loud." The rider had not looked directly at the woman until now. He did it with care. Her hair was darker than copper, her eyes an autumn brown with a pulsing ember within. Her bearing was straight-backed. Fatigue could not teach her to stoop. Her hands did not shake as they worked. "Lady," he said. Her lips softened and then went stern again in a breath. "We will not weigh your courtesy," she said. "We will weigh your truth. Why this young king?" The rider felt the question settle in his chest as if it had roots. He stepped forward, then dropped to one knee on the rough-woven rug without flourish. His mare's bridle chinked outside, as if the horse objected to any sudden shifts in gravity. In the red of the coals, the white scars on his knuckles stood out against sun-browned skin, a certain constellation of old work that any soldiers I would recognize. He had kept Dawn's hilt and stone under wraps for weeks and months, but his hands had not forgotten the weight of the grip nor the temper of the blade. He had not forgotten other weights, either. "Once," he said, "I swore to guard a king who did not deserve guarding. That mistake was not mine alone. I have lain under its stone a long while. Some oaths follow you under the earth. Some you crawl out from beneath. I do not know if this boy deserves guarding either. But I know he is a spark in a dark wind, and sparks deserve cupping if a fire is to be made. I know one other thing. A sword that stays sheathed for fear of the past is already a broken sword." If anyone breathed for a long heartbeat, the rider did not hear it. He did not bow his head. He would not pretend what trembled under all his sentences did not tremble there. The needle clicked. The Gretchen's mouth turned at the edge as if a joke had occurred to him, and he was deciding whether to say it or keep it. "Stand," another voice said. It was young and low and had iron filings in it. The boy with the pike snapped to attention, startled as if a deer had left the trees and spoken. The rider stood. Robb Stark looked very little like a boy and very much like a man when he held himself against the weight he had inherited. He wore a shirt of boiled leather with a mail shirt loose over it, and a cloak lined in old wolf fur draped from one shoulder with a pin of bright steel. His hair was a brown that had been sunk in sunlight. His eyes were gray like rained-on steel. At his hip hung a sword that had not yet tasted as much blood as it would, and at his knee the great gray direwolf sat, tongue lolling, yellow eyes fixed. The beast's ribs shifted under its coat as it breathed. It was as silent as fog. Robb came nearer. He moved like a man learning the room his fate had become. "Sir Herod," he said, "you speak as if you know the taste of failure." "Everyone does, your grace," the rider said. He did not blink at the direwolf, though it was close enough now that its breath brushed his hand. "Anyone who says otherwise is lying or dead." "You kneel cleanly," Robb said. He stopped with one arm's length between them. "But your words carry ghost weight. What name did you leave outside this tent?" "I left my father's name and took a smaller one, as a man might take a smaller shield when he wishes to move faster." The rider drew an ordinary, serviceable long sword from the scabbard on his left hip with his left hand and laid it, carefully, handle toward Robb, on the table beside the map. the steel catching coal light in an honest, workmanlike gleam. Then, with the right, he lifted a wrapped parcel he had carried slung at his back, unknotted it, and let white light spill into the tent, cool and pure as the sun just before it clears the horizon. The men nearest him flinched. The woman's needle paused and the Gretchen's eyes sharpened. The direwolf's head tipped, curious and unafraid. Robb did not step back. He lifted his chin a fraction, as if presented with a blade that had decided to be a question. The rider turned the weapon slowly so that it caught the red and made of it something lucid and lustral. It was long, nearly as long as a great sword, pale as winter's marrow, and the lines of it were so cleanly made that even men with no love of steel felt their breath grow pacer. Its fuller ran like a blade of light set into a blade of light. No sigils were set into the guard. No jewels fretted the pommel. Needed none. Men had named it long ago when men still believed steel could be sacred. "Dawn," Lady Caitlin said. It was very nearly a prayer. "By the, what trick is this?" "No trick," the great John said, and even his laughter gentled. "Good gods." The rider held the sword as if it had a voice that had to be spoken for it. "I am Arthur Dayne," he said. The tent took the name and made it old, and then the name, old already, became older, and it walked around the coals and out between the tent flaps and went among the tents, and men who had not heard a whisper of it for years turned their heads without knowing why. Arthur waited for the denial, the cry of liar. The wrestling men did when faced with the impossible returning like a tide that had been told to stay out. Brynden Tully, grizzled and lean, had slipped into the tent with the soundless grace of a man who had long ago outlived shock. He stared now with a hunter's flat stare, as if deciding if the quarry before him were real and if a shot would waste an arrow. A sallow man in a lame-patched jerkin made the sign of the seven under his breath. The boy with the pike swallowed very hard. The dire wolf sniffed Dawn's edge and hummed in its long throat. "You died," Lady Caitlin said. Her voice had flint in it. "At the... Not all men who fall leave their bones where the story says," Arthur replied. "Some find a way to their feet when the story refuses to believe in them any longer." "Then you left your corpse behind," Brynden Tully said in a tone one could use to measure leather straps. "Who carried you out?" "I did," Arthur said, and he did not look at Brynden as he said it. He looked at Robb. If the hall had been fuller of Targaryen colors, he might once H. Ave knelt without question and like a man thrust into a river and glad for any shore. If the tent had flown a dragon, he might have cut himself with Dawn and welcomed the sting. But there was a wolf here, a boy with his father's steady regard and none of his father's age. Arthur folded his fingers over the long white grip and eased Dawn back into its cloth as reverently as a man might swaddle a child. "I will find my own forgiveness," he said, not knowing if he spoke to his own blood or to some god who hated him. "In service, if you will have me." Robb was silent for a time long enough to be called patience. The coals murmured. Outside, a trumpet sounded some pivot of morning duty, and men's voices rose in answer. Could have been any morning. It was not. "You want to wear white again," Robb said at last. "I never stopped," Arthur said, and his mouth tightened a fraction that might or might not have been a smile. "But if white can be sewn into gray and not weaken it." "White and gray," the great John chuffed. "Good. Pretty cloaks for winter. We'll roast you like geese if you blunder, lad." Lady Caitlin rose then and set her needle down in a neat straight line, as if to say that some things could be ordered. "What will it mean, Robb?" she asked. "To take a man of such name into your shadow? Your enemies will call you a usurper with Targaryen salt. Your friends may call you that too. When did my enemies stop calling me worse?" Robb said softly. He put his hand out, not to the blade, but to the bundle of cloth that covered it, and then carefully to Arthur's forearm. "I don't need your sword because men sing about it. I need your sword because winter is coming, and there are too many roads to guard and not enough men who know how a road is guarded." Arthur did not bow. He knew what his knee meant when he set it down. He knew what rising would mean too. He set his knee to the rug a second time and closed his hand around Robb's wrist. Scholars in southern keeps would have written the moment into careful words if they had seen it, measured the political weight against the ghost weight, brewed the meanings together like a complicated tea. Arthur felt the heat of a living hand, and that was quite enough. "Then I will be your sword," he said. "I will be Lord Commander if that is your wish, though I have not warranted a command since." He let the sentence drop like an empty cup. "What you were before," Robb said, "does not make you unuseful now." "My king," the great John said, scratching under his beard with a grunt. "Naming white cloaks takes more than a rumor and a morning. The men will want to see something." "They will," Robb said. "You will." Brynden Tully, who had said almost nothing, stepped forward. "We should see him with steel in his hands," he said simply. "You can measure a man's heart by how he carries his blade more honestly than by 100 oaths. If he is what he says, I want him next to you when the light fails." The weather was still thoughtful when they went out into it. The mists had thinned where the sun had elbowed through, laying coins of light in the wet grass. The training yard made a raw circle among tents, ropes and pegs set to hold a margin where men could swing and not cut anyone's bread hand off by accident. Swords rang, the sound fine and old, and the men at practice paused, one by one, as Robb came among them and the direwolf paced, and the white sword, wrapped, came like a second moon in Arthur's hands. "Pike boy," Robb said, and the boy blinked hard and came forward. "Fetch Sir Wendell Dacey Mormont, and that Sellsword from the Green Fork who says he once fought 5 men on a raft with a boar spear. The one with the missing ear." "Yes, your grace," the boy stammered. He was very nearly running. Arthur undid the wrappings again and set Dawn on the trestle table that had been claimed for repairing buckles and straps, near a cup of awls and a tin of grease. Men gathered like rodents when the mill wheel stops and quiet pours over the place where noise used to be. Dacey Mormont came like a good wind, courier quick, a bear's daughter with braided hair and eyes that took in the world as if to choose which parts to keep. Wendell Manderley came with a laugh already half-formed, thick around the middle and heavy on his feet, with a war hammer that looked like a toy until he picked it up. The Sellsword came at a measured prowl, his ear a scarred fold. Brynden Tully selected a practice blade and offered it out. "Use this," he told Arthur, not without a test in the tone. "If you cut my kin in two, I will tie you by the ankles to a mill and drown you in a slow turn." Arthur was already reaching for the practice sword. He took it left-handed first, then right, then tossed it lightly to make it spin and caught it, feeling the cheap steel's bounce and poor temper as a musician might test a loaned instrument. He smiled a little to himself. He felt younger when he had wood or steel to explain the world to him. "What will you have me do?" he asked. "Let's have you show us your foot," Dacey said, tightening her own glove and rolling a shoulder. "My mother says men who fight with famous names often forget they have feet." "Your mother is right about more things than she bothers to say aloud," Arthur answered. He set his stance with care, and the grass by his right boot darkened as it took his weight. They came at him together. That was the great John's doing. He had a taste for putting men into deep water to see who swam. The Sellsword fainted first, hungry, quick, testing for respect, then leaped in, trusting Dacey's cover. She came low and to Arthur's offside where his age might favor him, a bear's cub seeking the soft space behind the ribs. Wendell Manderley strode, raising his hammer in a level swing that would have crushed a shoulder if it had found bone. Arthur moved like a door that had been well hinged and often used. He pivoted out from the Sellsword's ch. Arge not by meeting it but by being where it wasn't by the time it arrived. He lifted the practice sword to amuse Wendell's hammer without peacocking, letting the head glance off wood and cheap steel in a managed slide, felt the shock rattle to his elbow, and gave it back to Wendell as if handing him a heavy dish. In the same breath, he dropped his left shoulder to brush Dacey's strike with his glove, his free hand slapping the back of her blade to flatten its bite. He did not turn his head. He did not stop seeing any of them while he saw each of them clearly. They liked him before the first exchange finished. They couldn't have said why, but they did. Liking a man's fighting is not the same as liking the man. Sometimes it is kin to it. He had no unnecessary movement. He did not show off, though he could have, and though it might have been sweet to do so with their eyes on him. He placed himself where their tools were dullest. He took only the exact air he needed to breathe. "You have the water dance in you," the cell's word panted, circling, ear twitching. "And the mountain's patience." "I watched men who carried both," Arthur said. The second pass went quicker. Wendell Manderley fell and rolled and laughed at himself with a great gust that shook breath from the men watching. Daisy got her blade against Arthur's thigh hard enough to leave the skin under the leather stinging. The cell's word made him lift his heel to save his toe bones and grinned through his missing ear. A third pass folded the cell's word with a touch that made the older man's respect show up in his eyes like light in a pane of glass. A fourth put Daisy on her back with Arthur's glove under her skull to save it from the dirt. She accepted his hand up with a look that said she would have preferred to manage it herself, but she did not throw his kindness away as if it were an insult. Wendell put an arm around her shoulders and shook her like a sack, laughing, and she headbutted him in the stomach so that he wheezed and laughed harder. "Good," Brynden Tully said softly to his own teeth. The great John spat in the grass and thumped his own breastplate with one meaty fist. "He moves like the truth," he said. "All right, you can keep the boy in one piece, at least for mornings." Robb had not moved while they played their game. He watched with the stillness of a hunter who has not yet decided if he prefers this deer or the next. The direwolf sat at his heel until the last pass. Then it rose and came to Arthur, as if it had decided something. It nosed at Arthur's right hand where old scars lay crosshatched, and at his sleeve where a faint smell of oil and clean stone had sunk into the cloth. It made a small sound in its chest that was almost a purr and almost a question. Arthur put his hand out, palm down. The dire wolf rested its heavy head under his fingers. "He'll do," Robb said. At that, a cheer rose from the ring that was not so much planned as it was honest, and the mist took it and made it a thin thing, and sent it up the river where fishermen lifted their heads and wondered. That night, the camp lay under a bowl of sky rubbed dark and studded with stars that had chosen to show. The river thought its slow thoughts. Men told stories because they were men, and some of the stories were new because they had not found time to become old yet. The lords who could carry meat wrapped in bread. The men who could not make do with porridge. A woman's voice rose like the memory of a bell as she sang to a child. The dire wolf haunted the perimeter and came and went wherever it liked. Arthur sat with his back against a wagon wheel and a cloth spread on his knees. He had taken Dawn out and set the blade across his thighs as if it were a sleeping child. He cleansed it with oil that smelled of lemon and snow. Newcomers called him mad about his metaphors when they first heard him say such things. But the men who had known him once knew better and would only answer that steel had its own weather. A shadow fell across him. The flint of it would have been familiar even if he had not looked up. "Lady," he said, acknowledging the shape before it declared itself to the night. "The maesters say it is not wise to temper a blade at a campfire," Caitlin Stark said, standing with her hands folded. "And my father used to say the maesters were lovers of books and not steel." She sat on the wagon tongue because she had no fear of road muck and because dignity is a thing you either carry or you don't, and it is more offended by pretense than by dirt. "It is not wise to temper steel at a campfire," Arthur agreed, and he touched the blade no more than was necessary. "I am not tempering. I am remembering. Clever of you to call it that. It is always best to get one's own judgment in before a stranger applies his." She smoothed her cloak over her knee and glanced at the sword not with the awe men had, but with a woman's careful regard. "She is beautiful. Things that have killed are often called that," Arthur said. He did not apologize for the she. Words for living weapons have their own pronouns. This one has done its butcher's duty and also been used to cleave bread at empty tables. Was that a choice? In the moment? Often no. She looked up to the stars, and the stars did not answer her, which is what stars do. "My husband spoke of you seldom," she said finally. "When he did, there was respect in the space between his words. There was also a weight." She glanced down again. "He carried a weight for many men. He was good at it." "I gave him a weight he did not deserve," Arthur said. "When you have been wrong and lived, it is a penance to be fitted every morning." "I am suspicious of men who claim their own transgressions too readily," Caitlin said. Sometimes they do it for applause. Sometimes they bind their guilt around themselves like a cloak, and the warmth it gives them keeps them from the cold that would make them move. I do not talk tea. Oh, be warm, Arthur said. He worked oil into the cloth, watched it glow against dawn's cold gleam. I talk to keep from drowning. Do not drown, she said. I try not to. The current has its say. He wiped, and then wiped again, eyes narrowed for any blemish in the steel. Do you object to your son taking me into his shadow? Yes, she said at once, and I am glad of it. He looked up. She held his gaze. It is not my habit to pretend that my fears are not my fears. I do not like to be surprised, and you are a surprise. I do not love what your name brings to mind. But there are wolves in the south who would take my son's bones and make cloaks of them. And if your sword can keep him warm, I will bear the sting. If you harm him, I will shout it to the gods and to the men of the north until you have nowhere to lay your head. Her mouth made a slight shape that could be called a smile only by very charitable folk. Do not harm him. I will not, Arthur said. It was promise without poetic dressing, the sort a man gives when he knows the cost. You knelt to him under a trout and a wolf, she said, the small smile widening very slightly. That will do for beginning. We will find you a godswood. Riverrun's godswood was no weirwood grove. The old trees had been felled generations past when the Tullis bent their knees to a different set of faces. In its place grew a stand of beech and alder around a pool where the river's slough stilled and reflected the sky in fragments. Mushrooms clustered around the exposed roots in a little republic. Men came there with their troubles because people always need doors where they can knock even when no one answers. Arthur went there with Robb the next day in the hour before noon, when mist had drawn back and the coolness of morning had not quite loosened its hold. He did not bring the sword that day. He did not have to. He carried it when he breathed and when he slept. He knelt under a beech with a ruffled skirt of leaves and did not pray like a Southron because whatever he had never been that. The air smelled green. Robb stood and watched him without being impatient. The direwolf drank with a sound like silk being torn. I let go of one oath in blood, Arthur said finally. I let go of another in silence because there was nothing left to speak to. Men I loved went into the ground. I did not put them there, but I could not take them out. He looked into the water and saw the broken sky. I will swear to you in a way that does not mock the truth. Speak, Robb said. Arthur rose. He had been a man who loved ritual once. Now he had only a few words left that could make shape of things for him. I give you my sword not for a day or a season, but while I have breath and will, he said. I will stand between you and whatever you ought not to meet with bare hands. I will wake when you are sleeping and I will sleep where you put me. I will take no wife and father no children while I wear your cloak. If you make me a cloak to wear. He paused, the corner of his mouth twitching. If a god listens in these thin-leaved places, let him hold me hard to it. If no god listens, then there is no one to save me if I break it. He looked Robb in the eye. This is plain, and it is all I have. Then it is enough, Robb said, and it was without the flourish of a king, but with something like relief. Rise, I will call you Lord Commander of my guard. If the South says I have no right to a Kingsguard, they may keep their words, and I will keep you. We will make our own words. We will call them wolves. Wolves wear gray, Arthur said. Wolves go where the snow goes, Robb replied. When we ride, they will ride. When I sleep, one will stand at my door. He glanced at the ring of trees, the pool, the bright scuttling waterboatmen stitching their ticked lines across the surface. We will take your white and line it with fur. We will need 7, Arthur said, the old shape of a circle forming itself even while he tried to prevent it. Men love patterns more than they love facts. Facts can starve a man. Patterns feed him on shadows. The number will comfort the men and bite our enemies, and it will make my sleep poor for years. 7, Robb agreed. Dacey, Wendell, Ser Perwyn Fry if he can swear to stand with me before standing with his father. Tallheart's son, if he can learn not to look at his boots when he fights. The Sells word with the missing ear, if he can learn to love someone other than himself. The last, he shrugged. We will see. Not Roose Bolton, Arthur said. The name a stone that did not skip when it kissed the water. Not any man who rides under the flayed man's cloth. If you put one of them by your bed, do not sleep. I was not thinking of it, Robb said in that careful tone men use when they were thinking of it and need to step back without shame. You do not like him. I do not like hunger when it smiles, Arthur said, and then, because he had said too much, he said no more. If camp mornings had run like marbles down a hill before, they began now to run as if some child had arranged little chutes and gates for them, and even the first frost of night could not stop their rolling. Arthur woke before the earliest spark of light far to the east. He did this without the argue of an alarm because a man who has set his mornings correctly can order himself without bells. He said nothing to those who slept. He moved like a man who had learned the tent's pegs by touch and the place where the canvas lifted near the bottom seam and added a second seam himself because he disliked drafts. He went to the place he had set aside in the training yard because ritual had its place if it kept men alive. He took the seeks from its sheath in a single movement and cut air until the air was honest with him. When there was enough light to show him the small leaves quivering at the droop of a willow by the ditch, he set the seeks aside and took up the long pea, racked its blade and made it behave. When at last men began to come in raggedy, good-humored groups, squires with bed hair, knights with creaking joints, women with their wrists wrapped, he was warmed through and had laid down all the night's ghosts on the grass where the handiwork of boot soles would stomp them into the earth. He taught. He did it the way a man drinks who knows water is precious. He gave a little, then stopped them when their bodies lied to them and said they had done what he asked, and he gave a little more, and then he showed them how easy it is to be clever in the wrong direction. He put Daisy Mormont on the far side of a pole and set the Sellsword to poke at her with the blunted iron tip of a spear and made her not look at the spear for 10 exchanges in a row without spoiling it. He had Wendell Manderley count out loud 1, 2, 3, until his body learned where to put the fourth step without the act of counting moving his mouth. Men thought this foolish and then felt, in the marrow of their hips, how the count saved them from their own clumsiness. He put a boy in front of him, the pike boy whose name was Hake, he learned, and had him try for 5 whole minutes to take a ribbon from Arthur's belt while Arthur walked a slow circle. The boy never succeeded. Arthur made sure the boy, in failing, did not learn to hate himself. When the boy, years hence, had to take something from a man who would kill him if he took too long, he might live because of it. At evening, he went among the night fires with Robb and said little. Even silence can be a kind of proof. Men watched the gray cloak begin to take shape in their minds, and cloth followed. A woman from White Harbor, clever of finger and tongue both, brought Arthur a length of wool white as milk and soft as yearning. She named her price. It was not as much as she could have asked. He paid it. 2 days later, a seamstress who had been a soldier's wife and had gone on being a seamstress when the soldier stopped came with gray wolf furs, old but sound, the ears missing from one pelt, and he took them, and she cut and sewed by the glow of a crescent moon and 2 coals saved in a clay pot. Daisy laughed, affection in it, when Arthur fussed over the fall of the hem, the weight of the fur at the collar. You would make a good wife with a needle, she teased. I did not carry the name they gave me all this way to trip over my own clothing, he said, pinning the fur where it canted. If you fall over, I'll push you all the way, she promised. We will call you Lady Morning. He did not mind the joke. When it was time, when 6 had sworn and the 7th had been found in an old man with hands like cable who had stood Robb's father's line once and thirsted quietly for a last duty, Arthur gathered them at the pool in the Godswood. It was dusk. The dragonflies had stopped their hunting over the water and sat on reeds like jewels that had decided to sleep. The air smelled of leaf rot and coins. Brynden Tully stood with a torch. Lady Caitlin stood with none, as if to say she would not remember this by the light of any fire. The great John came with his laughter held in, which gave him a tremendous gravitas. You will swear, Arthur told them, the 6 before him, Robb before them, not because oaths are magic, because men are stupid without words to keep their heads from loosening. You will fail if you have to fail and know it when you do. You will not make your failing someone else's meal. You will not pound your own guilt into thin sheets and wrap yourself in it and call it honor. You will watch. You will rise. You will sleep when he sleeps, eat when he eats, and when he does something foolish, you will forgive him and then tell him he's a fool. You are the wall between his heart and the world. If you like, call that love. They looked at him, and it occurred to him then that he had made himself into something, that work and presence and stubbornness can do as much as blood. He closed his eyes, because one must do that sometimes at the edge of an accomplishment. When he opened them again, he and Robb did what needed doing. The six knelt. One by one, they spoke their names into the darkening air, and the air took them and held them and would not forget them easily. Arthur drew Dayne and, holding the blade in both hands, touched each shoulder with the flat. Not lightly, but neither with a strike, and the blade lay cold and sure across wool. He wanted to call the names back, to tell them they could still run, to warn them about all the stupid little ways death can come, not the grand ones men sing about. He did not. When it was done, the dire wolf lifted his head and let a low note spill into the dusk that was not quite a howl and not quite a hum, and the hair went up along the backs of men's necks, and some of them would say, later, that they had felt something then like a wind blow through them from a place where no wind had any business coming. The torches threw back the pushing dark. The pool held the sky and the men in it and made two truths from one. Brynden Tully snuffed his torch with a pinch and a hiss when the last word died. After, as men drifted away, Daisy with her jaw set because ceremony always made her want to hit something. Wendell humming, the old man with cable hands standing straighter than he had in a decade. Robb lumbered his shoulders as if shaking off a hide that had kept him warm and heavy. He looked younger for a moment then, and Arthur saw the boy under the crown again. It did not make him love his duty less. "Thank you," Robb said. The words were ordinary. They were enough. "Now we begin," Arthur said. The beginning was quieter than men would have believed if they had come looking for stories. It was the work of making sure the tense ropes were checked each time the wind shifted and the weather came at them from the west without asking. It was the arrangement of the guard watches like layers of skin. Hake and his pike in the outer ring because the boy's ears worked well in the dark. The old man with cable hands in the inner ring because he woke at anything that was not his lord's breathing. It was the talk, low and calm, to the stewards who oversaw the commissary. Men who could be bribed and men who could be softened by flattery and men who could be respected into being better than they had to be. Arthur went among them and said what he had to say. He paid compliments like a man who knows coin can buy what coin cannot. Roose Bolton came on a day when the wind had picked up enough to make the banners snap like men being corrected. His horse was well-mannered and his cloak sat on him like a wet creature. He had smooth pale skin that showed veins when the light hit it. His eyes smiled without warmth. "I had not expected," he said, "to see the sword that killed so many in the south gowned like a bride in wolf fur." Arthur had waited for this meeting the way men wait for an ache that will not stay under a poultice. He had hoped to be wrong about the feel of Roose Bolton when Roose Bolton did not stand, and now that the man stood, he was not wrong. "It is a long road," Arthur said, his voice simple. "Climates change even if men do not." Roose's mouth flattened a little in apparent sympathy. "And yet," he murmured, "old loyalties can make strange sounds in the night." Arthur thought of the long knife he had once used to cut meat, how cleanly it had sliced, how it had had to be kept in its place because it had not known what it was for. "Loyalties that belong to ghosts do not sleep in tents," he said. "The living must sort themselves." "Were you looking for someone, Lord Bolton?" "A quiet place," Roose said. "A place where men watch so close they miss what moves in the corner of the eye." He smiled, slow. "The North is grateful for Southern help in learning that trick." "Some tricks are not tricks," Arthur said. "They are ways of not dying." "Ah," Roose said. "That's a trick I have always liked." He did not remain. He was not a man who lingered where he could not be what he wished to be without effort. He flicked 2 fingers in something that could be mistaken for courtesy and turned his horse. Arthur watched him go and did not let himself be seen to watch. When men under Arthur's eye looked for him, they found him where a man should be, not skulking after a lord through another man's camp. That night, he set the old man with cable hands to the second long watch rather than the first, and he put Hake with him. He woke twice and went out and looked at the ropes and lines and came in again. He did not see Bolton the rest of that day, and he did not step with Relief. Relief is a bad habit. Relief makes you leave doors open. Theon Greyjoy fought like a man trying to decide whether he was one thing or another. He smiled too widely when he struck true and cursed too sincerely when he failed, which is to say he was young. He came to Arthur in the late morning when the dew had lifted clean from the grass, without iron on him, both hands open. "Sire," he said, with that particular quality of respect that must be trained into a proud man until it sets and becomes real. "Can you show me the trick you used on Daisy? When you made her blade just slip?" Arthur had thought he would dislike the boy. Men had told him to. The boy made it hard to dislike him in the simple way that boys do when they want something without scheming. "It isn't a trick," Arthur said. "It is a way to think with your hand." "Come." They went to the willow by the ditch. A squirrel scolded them from its crown and flicked its tail as if it were a banner. "Put your blade in my space," Arthur told him. Theon did. He was quick. His blade was nimble, an extension of his arm. Arthur did not admire its flourish. He looked for how it drifted when it should not, for how Theon's shoulder betrayed his hand. "Again," he said, and again, until Theon's breathing learned to be quiet and his body forgot its own tricks. "What did your father teach you?" Arthur asked at last. He had learned that men gave you themselves if you asked them, as if the answer were as ordinary as salt. "That love is salt," Theon said, and then flushed, and then laughed in embarrassment at himself for having said it so plainly. "That a man should be sharp or be eaten." "Sharp things break," Arthur said. He went to Theon then the way a man goes to a dog who does not trust him yet, with open hands, without hunger. He moved Theon's elbow a finger's width and the boy's whole posture changed. "There. Do it with your eyes open instead of with your pride." The boy did, and he learned. His pride did not shrivel. It settled its weight inside his chest as if someone had set a heavy book there and told it to be a spine. As the days learned their own names, the army moved. Tents lowered and rose again like breath. Men shouted the names of towns the way men call the names of women they wish were with them. Robb met with lord after lord and made choices that would break or save him. Arthur stood 4 paces behind Robb and 1 to the left and beheld the faces of men who meant him harm and men who meant him good, and sometimes the same man wore both those faces. He said little. He learned much. He watched how fear made men talk faster and how shame made them still themselves. On a day when the air lay across the fields like fine glass and crows walked the furrows with arrogant deliberation, Arthur felt the littlest change in the weather of the camp, a cool along the skin like a shadow passing between a man and his fire. He could not say what made it. The rope lines were tight, the guard posts as he had set them. The cook fires burned 1 coal too long or too short. He walked the margin of the camp and felt it like a tickle at the back of his tongue, a taste of copper. He went at last to the smithy tent where a man of middling years and little hair beat out horseshoes. Why? Take honest ambition and not more skill than God had given him. "Do you shoe all horses?" Arthur asked. "When they stand still long enough," the smith said. He squinted at Arthur through the hammer's rise and fall. "What's wrong? You look like a man who has lost a coin he ought to have had in a pocket with a hole." "Who came to you lately?" Arthur asked. "New. A man with quiet hands. A man who does not sweat when he should. A man who smiles as if the smile were a debt and he resents paying." The smith blinked. "You've just carved a face I know without giving me a name." He set the hammer down. "Cellar rat came to tighten a girth," he said. "Did it with 2 tugs where a good man does it with 3. He put a little twist in the strap I didn't like." "Where?" Arthur said, and had the man show him. "Horses have their own scent, of grass and leather and warm iron." Arthur ran his hands along girths and straps until he found the twist a clever hand had hidden. A little kink that would have drawn taut and bit through leather under a rider's weight on a day the horse spooked. A little sin that could put a king on his back in mud before any enemy blade came near him. Arthur undid it and did the work again and made a knot of it that would take 4 men and a knife to sever. He said nothing to Robb about it that evening. He told Hake to keep watch over the horses with his good ears. He told the old man with cable hands that a mouse had moved in their walls and that they would starve it. 2 days later, when a boy in a shirt too thin for the hour came with a bit of folded paper for a man who happened to be somewhere else, the old man put a hand on the boy's shoulder. The boy tried to run, but the old man's hand was the sort of thing that had taught ropes what to be. The paper did not contain a map or a confession. It had 2 names in it and a line that would have meant nothing to a man who did not know where the horses were kept tonight and where the ropes had been slacked for the move. It was enough. Small, the great John said when Arthur put it in his hand. Rat work. He spat into the fire. I thought you didn't have rats, Stark. I thought your wolves ate them when they smelled them. They will, Robb said, and the dire wolf raised his head and showed a mouth full of consequences. Thank you, he told Arthur without lifting his eyes to meet his. Men noticed that. You will thank me when your horse does not throw you in a gully tomorrow, Arthur said. We are only doing our work. When they did come to a gully, 2 mornings later, the grass lay slick and treacherous and the sun had not yet burned the wet from it. Robb's gelding skidded, set its feet, tested its balance, and came down the slope like a cat, clean and sure. The men watched. Men always watch their lords. Word went along the line faster than any trumpet. In quiet moments, when there were such, Arthur sat with his back against a tree or a cart and let memory come at him, because a man who keeps memory in a cage will only make it meaner when it breaks out. He thought of a sword in a dawn-lit tower room and men he loved dying 10 breaths from him. The color of Rieger's eyes when he listened and did not come to show the sort of breath he should have had. He thought of a girl whose laughter stepped lightly and went away before anyone could get a hand around it. He thought of a boy with a lord's gravity and a bastard's loneliness and a look in his eye like a winter lake. He let the thoughts come and then fall. He did not catch at them when they tried to drag him by their ankles. He made himself look around at the men with him now and at their stubby, ugly fingers and their scars and the way they squinted into the light as if their eyes had to learn how to use it again each time. This was the world. These were the men. He had made himself into a tool for a world that had used him once and broken him. Now he would be a tool for a world that did not know his name and did not care what he had been called. This is how men live when they do not have the luxury of dying. On the night before they were to ride for the twins, those 2 towers straddling a river like greedy legs and asking toll in grain and honor, Arthur lay awake on his pallet and listened to the army breathing. He could tell which man in the ring farted by the sound alone. He did not let himself smile. He felt the weight of the cloak on his chest, white and gray, stitched with a care that felt like love. He reached for the old knife he kept under his pillow and turned it in his fingers until the shape of it made sense to him again, as if he could make all unknowns behave by reminding himself that some things stayed true if kept oiled and modest. Across the tent, Robb rolled and muttered. The dire wolf huffed and pressed against him, as if to argue sleep into him. Arthur stood, careful in the dark, and put a small log on the embers in the brazier. He did it with the same concentration he gave a blade. He let his mind skim over the names of the men who stood watch and saw them each in his head, which is a thing a commander must do if he does not want to become a painter of numbers on a ledger. Dacey, Hake, the cell's word with the missing ear, the old man, Wendell, a boy from Barrowton who had never smiled since his mother died of a cough in autumn, and who had joined the Guard because he believed very simple things about loyalty and wanted to live in a world where the simple things did not make him foolish. It would be a slow dawn and a slow day. The road would not give much. The phrase would feign injury and demand apology and bear insult with all the theater of men who had learned early the profit of keeping their heads attached to their necks. Robb would need his measure. Arthur would give it to him. He slept then, at last, the sort of sleep that comes when a man has put his thoughts where they belong for a time, knowing they will jump the fence and run when he is not looking. Morning came with a surprise charity. The river ran level and the sky, though clouded, did not mean mischief. The army moved. Men threw their packs on their shoulders and cursed because that is what one does when a weight settles in again. Arthur went to the front with Robb and one of the Fry boys, Perwyn, riding slender and talking too much out of nervousness. "My father will. Well, he likes to be courted," Perwyn said with a grimace that was almost a smile. "He will need telling. He will need telling twice." "Then we will say it twice," Robb said. He had learned how to make patience sit on his shoulders like a hawk that might lift in a breath. They came within sight of the twins by midday. The towers peered at them like eyes, the bridge between like a nose turned up toward them in disdain. Barn swallows scissored over the water. The banners were all out, their colors gaudy in a way Arthur had learned to distrust. He set the guard ring as neatly as one sets a place at table for a guest one does not love. While Robb and the lords rode forward to make talk of marriage and fealty and crossing fees, Arthur stood at the center of his small world, which was the king's body cast in shadow by the bridge. He watched the corners of things. He noted a stone in the mud that had been moved and set again. He noticed a young fry footman whose eyes lingered on Robb as a butcher lingers on a calf he has not yet decided to keep. He said nothing and remembered the face for later. The talk lasted. Whatever the words were, they made a long braid and could not be untwisted easily. Arthur drank water and felt it go to ground. He let the day dry on him and did not move more than he needed to. He was 20 and then 30 and then older, and always he had known how to stand where a wall should be and be a wall. "Lord Commander," Hake whispered, appearing at his elbow like a willow branch bending into the frame of a man. Arthur had made the boy learn to come up on men quiet and then not do it again unless he had business. The boy's eyes were bright with the useful sort of fear. "A cart," Hake said. "Canvas over it. For men pushing." "Where?" Arthur said, as if they were talking about something stupid and dull. He did not make the mistake of looking where the boy pointed. "That is how you tell a man where you are going to look." Hake swallowed. "There," he said, and Arthur let the corner of his eye collect the cart. He saw it for a long moment and then he saw what was not there. The marks of wheels in the mud. No, the Freys weren't fools enough to roll wheels where men could see and read them. They carried the cart and set it down now and then, and the set-down places did not arrange themselves as a man who was in a hurry would leave them. The canvas sagged over angular shapes that were not grain sacks. One of the bearers had a sprig of sweat-damp hair stuck to his forehead that did not fit a man doing heavy work for long. There was a smell under the river smell. "Go," Arthur said softly, and in that one word Hake learned that he had not failed in bringing the thing, and learned also that he would not be allowed to do anything foolish. He ghosted back. "Wendell," Arthur said in a normal voice, the sort of voice one uses to ask for a loaf. And Wendell came because Wendell had given himself to the work and to whatever Arthur's voice needed. "Look to the rope lines," Arthur told him, "and then come behind me and stand. If I fall, you will be standing where I fell and you will do the same thing." "Yes," said Wendell. He did not ask for the thing to be named. He had learned that the naming of a thing could make it spook. Arthur walked toward the cart. He did this in no hurry. He made himself the picture of a man who was bored and had gone to stand somewhere else. In the corner of his eye, he saw Brynden Tully watching him from a shadow on the far flank, and knew that the man in the shadow had read the cart for what it was. Arthur did not look for Robb. His work now was to make sure the world did not get within reach of the boy's blood. He stood at the cart and lifted the canvas. The men under it froze as if the lifting of the cloth had paused their blood. Their eyes made a sound he had heard in men's eyes before. "That is a pretty spear," Arthur said to the thing beneath the canvas, as if to a child with a toy he admired and meant to take away. "It is a bit long for throwing indoors." The man with the sprig of hair put his hand to the butt of the spear that had been laid along the cart bed beneath sacks, the iron head concealed as if it were merchandise. His mouth made a sound before his voice did. Wendell, behind Arthur now, breathed out and settled himself. The other men stared, willing themselves to be somewhere else in their minds. "You can try," Arthur said softly. He put his hand on the shaft. The man with the sprig of hair tightened his grip. For a heartbeat, their hands were on the same length of ash wood. A season of growth wrestled in a single breath between a man who had decided to kill and a man who had long ago decided not to die easily. "Or," Arthur said conversationally, You can go home tonight with your teeth all still your own." A sound, not loud, came from the bridge, the sound of talk turning a corner. Arthur did not look. He tightened his hand and felt the other man's grip soften with a minute calculation. Not love of life, but a weighing of it. He eased the spear away and felt it belonged to him as his weapons always did, obedient as a thought he had practiced. He set it gently on the ground where it could not do mischief. He let his hand remain open where it could be seen. "I don't know what you meant to do," Arthur said, "and I do not need to know. Stand up straight. Do not turn your faces away like boys who have broken a cup." They obeyed, confused by the ordinary voice, unsettled by being treated like men in the act of being boys. He pointed them to the left and Wendell to the right, and they walked between. It did not require chains. It required only that someone be there, with a voice that meant to be obeyed, and with a name that had made itself into something men had to step carefully around. Brynden Tully took them with a glance and handed them off with a word and did not make a show of it. When Robb rode back down off the bridge, his face was very still. It had tiredness in it and something like victory, something like having not lost what would be needed later. Caitlin rode beside him, her eyes hard. The fry boy Perwin watched Arthur as if Arthur were a book he wished to read and did not know his letters well enough to read without help. "What did I miss?" Robb asked under his breath as he came even with Arthur. "Something unimportant," Arthur said. "That will never trouble you now." Robb looked at him then in the easy way he had learned to look now when he did not wish to hang the weight of the world around a man's neck. "Thank you," he said again, and if the words were the same, they were newer in their saying. They crossed in time. They did it because men, when they must, find ways to cross. The twins' shadows went over them, and the men swallowed and did not say what crossed their minds when the stones rose on either side like jaws. The wolves passed cool as breath through the teeth. Arthur rode as if he were a man of winter always and nothing could chill him that had not already tried. On the far side, when the banners had once again found a steady air to billow in and the road straightened, Arthur fell back a little and let the line pass him until he rode near the baggage where the ordinary lives. He checked the rope lines again and the ways the pots were packed and the look on the faces of the men who drove the carts. One of them, a spare man with a scar like a handprint under his jaw, looked up and met Arthur's gaze and nodded once. Arthur nodded back. Men who do simple work well are the bones of all armies. Night set 5 miles on, under a spread of beech trees where the leaves made a roof that caught bits of dropped starlight. Arthur walked the circle one last time and came back to the inner ring. He stopped when he saw the boy from Barrowton staring up at the scatter of sky through leaves. "Cold?" Arthur asked. "Not yet," the boy said. "My mother used to tell me stories about the stars. She told me they are the eyes of the gods and the fires of men who died looking up." "Both," Arthur said. "Do you believe that?" the boy asked. His voice sounded fragile only because he had used it so little. "I believe men need stories," Arthur said, "and I believe some stories are very close to being true." He clapped the boy on the shoulder. "You will keep watch. If your mind goes on wandering, let it wander in a circle as well. Come back to where you started each time. Don't get lost." "Yes, Lord Commander," the boy said, as if the title were a cloak too big for him but one he meant to grow into. Arthur went inside the tent and stood, just inside, listening. Robb lay on his side, hair in disarray, face gentled in sleep into a younger country. The direwolf sprawled with legs askew, belly rising and falling, a messy god of dreams. Arthur looked down at his hands. They did not shake. He let his breath go out and come back. He lay down and closed his eyes. Dawn, when it slid under his lids, was gray as the lining of his cloak. He rose and moved in the practiced way men do when they have found all their mornings and put them in order like stones in a wall. He went out to show the sun how a sword is lifted and lowered, not because the sun needed instruction but because a man does always or he will forget. He thought of the long road ahead and did not flinch from it. He did not run to meet it either. He took the step he had to take. The river would run and the world would change or not. Men would be fools and then heroes and then fools again. Betrayal might arrive later by soft increments, dressed in friendship and cleverness. Winter pressed its palm against the window of the year and fogged the glass. The boy king slept and woke and learned and made mistakes. The sword in Arthur's hands stayed true when he asked it to, and not otherwise. He would show the world what a man could make of failure. He would bind his oath about him as one binds a wound, not to keep blood in, but to keep dirt out. He would watch the corners of things, and the way shadows move when no fire changes. He would be there when breath came short and the air tasted like iron. He would be Lord Commander of the Wolves, in the north and wherever the north went, and everything that had broken in him once would be a seam now, stronger for having been mended, and the mended place would hold until it did not, and when it failed, there would be someone there, Hake with his pike, Daisy with her jaw, the old man with cable hands, to be the next layer between death and a boy with a crown he had not asked for and took anyway. And if the seam held longer than the world expected, that would be worth as much as songs. He thought that as the pale light grew wider and the sound of the armies waking rose around him like the surf of a strange sea, and he lifted the sword again and again until his shoulder ached, and his breath made smoke in front of him, and the day began to be itself. By the time the sun took a proper hold over the treeline, the camp had shaken itself awake like a big dog. Men stamped their feet, beat dust from cloaks, laughed at nothing to prove the morning could be survived. The smell of frying oats tugged at Arthur's belly. He ate a bowl of it on his feet while speaking to 3 different men about 3 different idle tragedies. One had lost his spoon, another had found his brother and wished he hadn't, a third had broken his bootlace and sworn it was a sign from his dead mother. He answered each with the patience men often mistake for softness, and then found Robb where. The maps were pinned with pigbone pegs to a board of rough pine that had learned every road the hard way. Robb had the pinched look of a man whose teeth fit tolerably but whose jaw hurt anyway. He turned at Arthur's step as if he had learned to know that particular weight of footfall at last. "Lord Karstark is impatient," Robb said without preamble. "Lord Bolton is courtly. Lord Greatjohn is hungry. Lord Blackfish is my best patience. My mother is my worst truth. And you?" His mouth moved, a child's grin fleeting through a man's restraint. "You are very quiet. That worries me." "A quiet guard is a good guard," Arthur said. He leaned over the map but did not touch it until invited. "May I?" Robb nodded, and Arthur's finger went to the ridgelines sketched as lightly as if the land had been cold that day. "You don't need to beat Stafford Lannister at a parade ground," Arthur said. "You need to make him cross his feet before he knows he meant to step." "The Blackfish says the same," Robb said. "He says the West is full of men who believe themselves lions because they were told once that they are." "The river told me many things," Arthur said. He traced a curve that was not a line on any map, a way through scrub and heather and bracken, a way fit for men who did not mind mud in their boots. "And one thing the river taught me is that a king can win by not making noise." Robb watched his hand, not the map, and that made Arthur like him more. "We will do what is needful. But first I must outtalk Lord Walder into believing the future tastes like stew he hasn't eaten yet." "He likes to be fed the promise of soup," Arthur agreed. "Let him smell it a while. Serve it thin. The man who lives from tolls fears empty roads more than he fears a king." Robb's mouth flickered again. "I will tell my mother that you said this. She will enjoy disliking you and agreeing with you at once." They rode again soon after, through fields where geese stood like fat princes and complained at everything, through dips in the land where fog hid and sulked, through small villages that had learned to keep their fires low when soldiers' banners went by. Children peered at the gray cloaks, and a few waved shyly. Arthur inclined his head to them as if to peers, not because he wanted to charm their mothers, but because a child's memory tends to hold fast to the shapes of men with steel and soften or harden accordingly. A boy who waves at gray cloaks today might put his hands on a training sword in 3 years rather than on a cudgel by a tavern door, and a little of the world could be mended that way as mending goes. Perwyn Fry stayed close by with the awkward determination of a man trying to separate himself from his blood without quite cutting the artery. He spoke of horses when he could, of weather, of the way the bridge had been built, as if the shape of it could free him. He did not ask to swear anything. He did not boast. He looked at Arthur now and again with a measuring curiosity, as if waiting for the moment the man would slip and reveal the legend's trick seam. "You are not what I expected," Perwyn said at last, when their horse's pace had fallen to a considerate walk along a wood's edge. "I often find that a kindness," Arthur replied. "I mean," Perwyn flustered and then gathered himself. "I mean, they said you'd be all light and lightning, and you hold the reins the way, like my old Septon held a book he loved." "I hold what I mean to keep," Arthur said. They crossed a stream that gossiped to itself among stones. The day felt as if it might forgive men for a little while if they took care not to trouble it. Perwyn stared at his mare's ears as if the shape would teach him something. "If I wish to," he swallowed, "if I wish to stand near the king in something other than a borrowed suit of good intentions, how would I proceed?" "With care," Arthur said, "and with a long patience." Perwyn gave a breath that was almost a laugh. "You should have been a Septon." "I have confessed my sins to men with hammers a great deal," Arthur said, "and they absolved me with bruises." Perwyn was silent a while longer, and Arthur let him be. Men need their silences shaped and not filled. When Perwyn found his voice again, it came quieter. "My father is a shrewd man," he said. He does not believe anything is sacred except advantage. I think he believes that makes him clever. Some men don't believe in stones until their foot finds one in the dark," Arthur said. He gestured negligibly at the road ahead. "Speak to Lord Stark when the day is slow and the weather fair, not under torches. Tell him what you can do cleanly. Speak nothing you wouldn't say with your head in a noose. Bring him a problem and half its solution. Leave with nothing but his word that he heard you. Do it again. After that, if you slit your own throat, I will kick you to wake you so you can finish what you started." Perwyn snorted at that, and some tension in his face loosened as if a knot had been untied. "Yes," he said. "Yes, thank you. Also," Arthur added, as if it were an afterthought, "eat bread and salt under every roof you pass with your father's name on it. Demand it if you must. People forget, but the old laws don't, even if they only live in men's bones now." Perwyn's head came up. "Bread and salt. Say the words in your heart if your mouth cannot. And if your mouth can, ask for it and speak the names you speak over the bread. Men who mean to do wickedness under a roof prefer to keep their wickedness from the gods' notice. Lower your head over the crust and make the gods listen." Perwyn looked at him very steadily then, long enough that he might have stumbled if he were not a good rider. "Your legend did not say anything about that. Legends are poor cooks. They salt too little and burn the meat," Arthur said, and touched his heels to Morning to move her along. They made 2 nights in farms that had learned to hide tea. Air lamp glow under pots. On the 2nd night, when the air carried a scent like crushed thyme and rain far away, Arthur sat with Robb and Caitlin and Brynden Tully in a barn suite with old straw and horse. It was a small council. Roose Bolton had feigned a need to speak to his men about discipline. The Great John had found a dice game and laughter and would bring both back with him later. Lord Karstark had taken himself to dark prayer. The 4 in the barn had the honest weariness of people who have not offended their own sleep, but who have not been well served by it either. "Theon," Robb said, as if there were only one word in the world that night. "He is my good brother. He is also not mine." He lay on his back on a folded blanket and stared at the line where the roof beams met, as if there were an answer hidden in the joinery. Caitlyn's hands were in her lap, folded as tightly as a woman can fold what she wants to keep. "Your father took him as hostage and made him a son," she said. "Both things are true. Both truths bite." "He is eager to be useful," Brynden said. "Eager men are useful when watched and ruinous when rewarded too quickly." "He wants to take a letter to Pike and bring a fleet back on a leash," Robb said. He turned his head then, and the boy came out from behind his face. The boy who had gone to fight in a rage to fix the world and discovered the world did not like being fixed. "And I want to believe that the ties my father tied will outlast him." Caitlin did not sigh because she was not given to such theatrics. She let her mouth soften and then harden again. "I have known Balon Greyjoy," she said, "and I have known men like him. A man like that will gnaw a tie before he will wear it." "I have not known Balon Greyjoy," Arthur said, and his voice was soft for the remembering it asked of him. "But I have met men who loved the storm more than the ships that carried them. The trick is to separate the man from the ocean. If you send Theon, send him with a piece of your weather he cannot forget." Robb turned to him. "What does that mean?" "Make it costly to come back," Arthur said simply. "Not in pride, in love. Load him with it until he has to drag it and cannot leave it behind. Men run to storms when they believe they are empty. It is harder to run when you are heavy with names." Brynden made a noise that might have been a chuckle in another man. "Give him a list, you mean," he said. "Bless him with errands." "Give him a list," Arthur agreed. "Give him a ribbon your sister once wore as a child and tell him she told you to take care of it for her. Give him bread from your mother's hand and a cup with a nick in it he remembers from when he was small. Have Daisy Mormont slap him on the shoulder hard enough to make him think of the bruise each time he shifts in the saddle. Tell him not to come back alone if he can help it. Tell him to bring some old man by the hand and a child on his saddle, because men who intend to burn ships do not bring children with them." Catelyn's eyes glistened in the low light, but it did not make her weak. "That is cruelty," she said, with something almost like admiration. "That is a rope," Arthur said, "and ropes are cruel if you prefer to fall." Robb sat up, his elbows on his knees, his hands linked. He looked at the three of them, then at the floor, then at the three of them again, as if he had learned that a decision is a kind of breathing you do with your whole face. "I will send him," he said, and Catelyn's mouth tightened and softened again, because she would not go back over words already decided. "I will send him with my love and with my list. And I will pray to gods I do not know how to pray to that he finds it too heavy to cast aside." "He may not," Brynden said, not unkindly. "He may choose to swim. Then he will drown," Catelyn said, and for an instant her voice was colder and older than any law written in any book. Arthur did not say what thrummed through him. How very many men he had seen choose the sea over the ship and mock the shape of their own drowning until their mouths filled. He thought instead of the way Theon had listened earlier, intent as a hungry dog who does not yet know if the hand reaching toward him holds meat or a stone. He would speak to the boy. He would not command him. There are some ropes a man must throw to himself. He found Theon the next day at a stream's bend where young men had gone to wash their hair and argue about who was strongest at anything, and Theon stood apart from them by 3 paces with his hair wet and dark and his smile only half formed as if he was not sure yet who to aim it at. Arthur waited until the boys had drifted away talking, until the light had shifted a little and the insects' talk had changed key. "Robb will send you," Arthur said. There was no point in easing into it like a man into cold water. Cold water takes a man whole. Theon pushed his hair back from his face and grinned then as if he'd found a shore he liked. "Did you tell him to? Or did you try to talk him out of it?" "I told him to bind you to the world so it would be harder to slip. That is not the same as telling him to send you." Theon looked up through the ripple of leaves. "You don't trust me." "I trust the fork in the road," Arthur said. "You may take either path. You are very quick. You could even take both if you didn't mind tearing yourself in two." The smile faltered and then became something like a man's expression. "You're not a kind man, sir." "I am not unkind," Arthur said. "I am precise. That looks like cruelty if you hoped for softness." Theon watched the stream. "Robb thinks I am his brother." "Robb is right," Arthur said, "and wrong. And both truths are so strong that standing between them requires a man to set his feet very carefully. You have a chance to set yours." Theon scooped water with his hand, let it run over his fingers and back to itself. "What did you do when you were young and someone asked you to stand between truths?" "I made a mess," Arthur said, and the rasp in his voice made Theon look at him sharp. "I held too tightly and broke what I meant to carry. I opened my hand at the wrong time and let something fall that ought to have been held. Then I tried to be clever and mended it badly. I woke a decade later with my hands all cuts and could not say which were earned and which were accidents." Theon's mouth went sideways. You make a poor saint. I am not in the saint business, Arthur said. I am in the work business. You will go to Pike. Take more than a letter. Take the sound of your name in friendly mouths. Take hunger for a table you know. Take your own anger and wrap it tight enough a man can hold it without being burned. Bring back something that proves you have hands and not just a swagger. You speak as if I'm two men, Theon said, but his voice grew thinner around the edges, as if he had heard something true and did not like how it fit. You are, Arthur said. That's not a sin. But two men cannot stand in one pair of boots for long without falling. He put his hand lightly to Theon's shoulder. When you come back, if you come back, and you have chosen something ugly, come to me before you go to Robb. Let me see if I can make it less ugly. I have practice at that. For once, Theon did not guard his face. For once, his pride stood aside and let his eyes be young. Why? He asked, very nearly pleading, though he kept the plea out of his throat. Because I would rather mend a line than cut you loose, Arthur said simply. Theon's head bowed. When it came up again, the swagger had crept back in, but it was better seated than before, as if at least it had put on clean socks. All right, he said. I'll bring you something, maybe a head. My father's, if it comes to that. Bring me a boat builder with clean hands and a girl with a good voice, Arthur said. That will tell me more than a head ever will. Theon laughed then at last, honest as rain, shook the water from his hand, and left like a young man does when he has decided to run at a thing. Arthur watched him go and made himself not pray. He had no talent for it. He returned to the work he knew. The wolves wore their cloaks before the week had turned over. White that would show stains and gray that would hide them. Fur at the collar that turned the wearer's shoulders into a shape that looked broader in torchlight than it was. Arthur set rules that were not pretty. No wine in the inner ring while the king slept, no exceptions. Bread and salt at every roof and names spoken over the crust. A copper hung at the bedpost in the king's tent with a chip in its rim. Each wolf touching it at the start and end of his watch to remind himself that care is a circle and not a line. A seam of gray thread stitched inside each cloak's hem. When a wolf broke a rule out of necessity and not self, he would snip one stitch and keep it in his mouth through his next watch, to roll under his tongue as a pebble that reminded him that sense must carry both shame and pride if it is to stay alert. The men thought the thread foolish until the first time one of them held it through a long cold night and found his mind sharpening because he had made himself a needle to bind his attention. They drilled the ritual until it made a sound around the king that men could recognize in their bones even from 3 tents away. The soft thock of staff touch at the hour. 2 low whistles in the middle watch that told the next ring to flex. A small clack as the copper at the post was tapped. It was music men could eat by. Music men could sleep by. Art dies where men pretend ritual is too silly for them. Armies are made where ritual is written in the body until the body sings it in its sleep. Daisy Mormont argued each rule and then followed it harder than any. She ran the ring like a woman counting, and her count did not lose numbers. She admired men who were good at something besides talking and did not mind being told so. She fought for the first watch. The old man argued for last. Wendell wanted middle because there was often food. Jaren, the cell's word with the torn ear, took whatever came and made it look as if he preferred it. He had a way of stepping around a post like a dancer around a partner who might trip him. He called Arthur Lord, not with any deference for titles, but because he liked to put the word against his tongue and taste the way a vow tastes when you put it near wit. Burren Tallheart bent toward the rules like a tree toward light. He forgot himself in the following at first and suffered for it when his muscles burned, then learned to let his body carry him and stopped clenching his jaw as if it were a fist. Tobin Knott, the old man with hands like cable, never called Arthur anything but Dayne, and did his work with a dour cheer that made younger men step a little squarer when his shadow fell near. He did not love the cloak, but he wore it as if it were a memory and slept like a man without guilt. 2 hours at a time and then springing awake as if he'd only gone to another room. Hake stood outring often, because his ears would hear a Vol's funeral procession if it came at the wrong hour. He started and started again at shapes in the dark. Arthur did not put him down for it. He had seen men ridicule boys into deafness and then weep when those boys missed the sound that mattered. He taught Hake to count heartbeats, to name 5 things by the weight of their step, to recite words under his breath in a steady cadence that would slow panic. The boy took to the tasks with a ferocity that pleased Arthur without making him softer. He would be something, that one, if he lived. The knights gathered themselves into a handful men could carry. The moon went from coin to rind and back to coin. They neared the country where the Lannister banners were painted on the land. Smoke had a different smell there, as if pride had an odor. Arthur walked the line of men's talk and smoothed it now and then like a hand on wrinkled cloth. He spoke to Roose Bolton once more in the middle of a long day, in a gap between hedges where nettles grew as if they believed themselves safe and were right. "The king is well guarded," Roose said, eyes narrow with amusement, as if the thought were a joke at someone else's expense. "Men do not often regret being alive," Arthur said mildly. "And yet many work hard to undo the error," Roose murmured. "Some men have never felt welcome in their own skins," Arthur said. "They try to escape by shedding it in public." Roose smiled without showing teeth. "You are a philosopher. I am an old failure," Arthur said. "They often sound the same. The battle at Oxcross did not begin as a battle. It began as a road and a rhythm. It began with Arthur telling the wolves to rip strips of cloth to bind around their boots, old shirts and dead men's vestments, and a piece from Wendell's sleeve that he howled over as if his arm had been taken off. It began with Brynden Tully describing the hill the way a man describes a woman he knew once and intends to see again. It began with Robb's eyes shining like a fox's eyes do when they know the path through bracken and nobody else does. It began with the slow, ridiculous procession of heavy men through light-seeming places, without mail, without the music of they wanted to be laden with. It began in stockings of a sort, in bare soles and dirty feet, in breath held and in breath released carefully enough the ferns did not shiver when it passed them. It began with the smell of bruised fern, which smells like something clean and like cut fingers. Arthur teased the line of the wolves through the trees as you would tease a thread through a needle's eye. Daisy went where the ground rose and fell most deceitfully, because her body loved such puzzles and solved them better than her pride would have liked to admit. Jaren's missing ear brushed branches and did not stir them. Tobin's knees did not creak. Burren put his whole attention in front of him as if his eyes had been made into feet, and when he slipped, his hand found purchase where his training had told it would be. Wendell's lips moved silently counting. Later he would confess that he had counted loaves and not steps, and Arthur would approve, because men move better counting what they love. Moonlight tried to reach them and failed. Far off, a night bird called as if it had no interest in politics. The smell of a Lannister camp went up ahead, fat and thoughtless. Men who thought themselves safe always smelled fattest. Arthur remembered too many camps that had called themselves safe, and then the way safety had lifted like a tablecloth snatched by a trickster with clever fingers. He did not love sneaking, he did not hate it. He believed in saving his men's blood. He believed in making enemies clumsy. When at last the earth's hush gave way to the scuff and clink of men at rest without being at peace, Arthur lifted a hand and stilled what was already almost stillness. He crouched. The ground was damp and gave a little under his boots and held together anyway. He felt it, the shape of the camp, the way people who have lived in villages feel the shape of their neighbors' houses even in the dark. Here a cook fire ring carelessly kicked with a heel. There a cart left at an angle that would trip the same man who left it if he rose in the night. The small gate formed by tents, the lazy string of shields. Men snored. A horse stomped lightly and resented its tether. Somewhere, a man coughed with a wetness that meant he would die in a year of something nobody could cure. These are the sounds of war, not horns and glory. Men's ordinary, ugly noises arranged in a pattern that tells you how they will die and how long they will live before they do. He had not brought dawn. He carried a short-handled axe, a thing he disapproved of but was fond of when the dark was thick, and a long knife at the small of his back. The wolves had been told twice and then told the third time with a look. Tie hair back, cloth to mute metal. Do not step on the bright of your own pride. Daisy grinned into the dark and became a shadow with good intentions. Jaren did not grin and became a plan. They slid into the camp like a rumor. They did not make a shape of themselves. They braided into the shape the camp already was and kept their breath small. Arthur could feel Robb off to his right, not because of the boy's heat but because the boy had learned to exist without noticing, and not many kings can do that. Brynden Tully was a larger absence, paradoxically. His stillness yelled in the dark in a way Arthur approved of because it meant the man was at work and not at pride. They took the first pair of sentries with a kindness the sentries did not feel. A hand over the mouth, a hard pull backward. A sleep that was also an end. Tobin's big thumb went where it needed, without fuss. Jaren moved faster than he cared to admit and was ashamed of his speed later, which is how you keep men like that from going bad. Dayne put a shoulder into a man's chest with more tenderness than she would have liked and stole his air before he knew he had had it. Burren Tallheart stared at a face while the life left it and set something in his own jaw. Later he would tell Arthur that his jaw had ached for a day, and Arthur would nod and tell him to sleep with a hot cloth on his face, and that would help. The fire pit was banked. Arthur kicked it with care to loosen coals without waking them fully. He raised the blade of his little axe and caught starlight with the flat, a glimmer no Lannister would have seen in time in any case. Men moved where they had to move. The rope that kept the horses was sliced so they would have a way to panic besides trampling men they slept near. Wendell belly crawled beneath a cart to cut straps that would keep spears bound in bunches. He grunted when he rolled onto a pebble, and the grunt was a clean sound in the heart of the danger that steadied more than it troubled. A boy woke and sat up and rubbed his nose and lay down again, deciding the shape that loomed near his feet was his mother and going back to a dream he would not tell in the morning. Jaren had to step over him and hated that stepping more than any killing he did that night. Later he would tell Arthur and Arthur would not make light of it. They set the oil on the canvas, not with a splash, but a whisper. Dayne took the left as if the left were owed her. Tobin took the right because his body knew the land favored right hands that night. Robb moved where he should, stubbornly, and Arthur's hand hovered once and he held it back because either you trust a king in his work or you do not. He breathed in and out, silent as a man keeping a secret from his own lungs. Brynden Tully's signal was the smallest sound, the hiss of breath taken through teeth. It threaded through the dark. The wolves knew it for what it was. Arthur lifted his hand and dropped it, and the world changed. Oil took fire with a noise like an animal giving up, and then it had no voice at all, only a hunger. Men woke as if stabbed and then were stabbed. Horses screamed, too loud, and Arthur winced because he loved horses and they do not scream without remembering later. But war steals gentleness first, and he had none to give in that moment. The wolves moved where the space let them. Arthur's little axe spoke very little. He did not give it rhetoric. He used the knife because the knife, if used correctly, can make the least noise. He used his hands because they knew the shape of other men's throats very precisely and did not need to be told twice. He could feel Dayne somewhere by the taste in the air. He could feel Jaren by the lack of mistakes where mistakes usually gather. Robb found a space and held it as if he had been born holding it. He called orders in a voice that did not ask permission from fear. Men heard him and obeyed because their bodies wanted to. Some always do and some never will. That is why there are kings, and that is why kings die anyway. Arthur kept men from Robb who would have made of him a story. He kept 3 that night, then a 4th, and did not count them until later because number is a way to confuse the hand while it is doing work. When light finally had more voice than dark and the brackens dew was steam and men were all shouts and the ground was a collage of new shapes men would later try not to see in the eyes of those who survived, Arthur stepped back and let his lungs come into his chest fully again. He checked the ring because habit is not a luxury. Dayne came in with blood on her cheek and a grin like a split fruit. Jaren came in with his ear torn anew and his eyes bright and sad. Tobin with a lip that bled and his body otherwise unoffended. Burren with too much breath in him and then not enough and then the exact right amount because he told himself to breathe. Wendell came in at last with a sack he'd knotted tight. He held it up in triumph and made as if to open it, and Arthur put a hand on it. Later, Arthur said, because he knew the weight in it would be heads and knew Wendell wanted to prove to someone there was useful meat inside. Breakfast first. Robb stood with his sword in his hand and looked what he was. Not a boy, not a god. Something you can't sing correctly and ought not to. He caught Arthur's eye and did not smile because there was no place to hang a smile on in that moment. He came to Arthur slowly and put his hand to the older man's forearm, and Arthur put his own hand to Robb's wrist, and they stood a breath like that, finding their way back to human from what battle makes of men. "It is done," Robb said. "It is begun," Arthur answered. They ate later in that strange bright after that always follows good violence and bad, because the body has its own calendar and celebrates by digesting even when the mind argues. Bread felt holy under Arthur's fingers, coarse and clean. He broke it and gave it to Dayne before he took any, and she snorted at the ceremony but ate like a soldier and not like a lord. Jaron sopped grease with his thumb and stared at the place where his thumb met his hand as if discovering that seam as a man might inspect a new bridge. Tobin told a story about a cow that had eaten a barber's wig, and Wendell laughed himself clean. Burren set his back against a tree and chewed as if he had forgotten how and then remembered. Slowly. There were prisoners. There are always prisoners when men live beyond the day they expected to die on. Robb listened to them with the quiet of a man who has learned that to be served well tomorrow you must be feared cleanly today. He did not snarl. He did not promise the sort of mercy that becomes a lie at sundown. He asked names and family, where they were from and where they believed they were going, and when men lied, he knew it and did not make entertainment of the knowing, and when they told the truth, he told them to live, and they cried in the way humiliated men do when they have been startled by gentleness and do not know what to do with it. Arthur made the wolves rest in turns, which they fought him for and then obeyed because the body is a treacherous ally and will pretend it can go on until it falls without warning. He lay back and closed his eyes while the ring was strong and tried to let sleep take him at its own speed. But memory is always watching for an open door. It came with its bag in its hand, politely as a guest, and set itself down by his head. Rieger's mouth set slow and careful and soft. A tower room where windows had blue felt in the air, blood making its old red arguments with stone. A laughter that felt like a bird's wing brushed and then gone. Names in mouths that had become stone. He did not turn those faces away. He let them sit. He let them complain. He did not give them the fire. And he rose, his head felt as it always felt after he had been visited. A little emptied out, and that emptiness useful because it had room for the day to come. They rode again because that is what armies do when battles are concluded and food has been found and debts have been tallied and men have cried with their heads turned away politely. Crows came on black ropes to the ground men had made charming to crows. The wolves' cloaks gathered road dust at the hem and grew less pretty and more themselves. Jaron took to humming under his breath. The tune had no shame and did not try to be large. Dayne challenged Burren to a race between noon and a dead stump and lost with a curse and kissed his forehead in mock blessing. Burren laughed like a boy and then looked around to see if anyone saw, and Arthur made sure he saw him and nodded once so the boy would know he was permitted joy. Tobin hacked a piece from a hedge with his knife and spent half an hour shaping it into a peg that would be useful to no one but him, which is sometimes how men keep from going too deep into their own skulls. The lords took news and made of it whatever their private needs required. Lord Karstark smiled once for as long as a man draws a knife, then put the smile away where he puts knives and polished his anger behind his eyes. The great John sang a song that had only 3 lines and did not carry. Roose Bolton had a good word to say about the way the horses had been handled and a worse word under it for men who handle horses in a way that makes noise. And Arthur listened and nodded and learned nothing new except the way a man can be pleased by the efficiency of death and not much else. Caitlin came to Arthur by a stream on a morning when frost had embroidered everything and children would have loved to touch the white only to discover it turns to water when you put your finger to it. She wore a cloak lined in winter's patience and her hair bound tight against the day. "You changed the taste of my son's camp," she said without preamble. "I do not know if I should thank you for that." "You don't have to," Arthur said. "No," she agreed, and part of her mouth softened. "But I might anyway." She moved to stand beside him, not in front of him, so that they looked together at the purse of the stream, fat with light. "You once swore to guard a man I would have gladly seen dead, had doing so not made me more a widow than I already was. Do you think of that when you look at my son? Do ghosts pull your sword arm?" "They try," Arthur said. "I tell them to pull at my other arm and leave the sword arm for now." And they obey? Her tone was dry. They sulk, he said, but they often learn to be quiet for hours at a time. She nodded once, as if this won some chess move she had been playing alone. Watch Roose Bolton, she said very simply. I am, Arthur said. And watch my son for pride, she added. The first is familiar to you. The second is soft as fur and can muffle a man before he knows he cannot breathe. I will cut holes in it, Arthur said. She turned then, and her face was a study in restraint and calculation, and that particular kind of love that has no use for theatrics. You are not as a song said, she told him. I have not been that in a long time, he answered. Good, she said, and left him to the river. The war rolled. Men fell into its grooves. News came like weather. It was carried on other men's faces before it was ever spoken. Once a courier's horse came blowing, and the boy on it was gray with road, and had the sort of look men get when they have outridden fear and do not yet know what to do with themselves without it. The boy said words that changed the set of several shoulders. River unheld, a cousin dead and two others not. A small town burned at the edge of the Green Fork, as if a bored lord had needed to see something aflame to know the day had passed. Arthur listened, weighed, and took from the telling not the tally but the tilt. How the stories leaned, how men told them and what they left out, and which lies were convenient and which were just silly. Perwyn Fry came at sundown 2 days after Oxcross with a request set in his mouth like a coin he dared not spend but insisted on showing. If I ask to swear, he said, will you refuse me? Probably, Arthur said, depending on what you say next. Perwyn swallowed and did not dress the swallowing. I have eaten bread and salt under a canvas I do not own, he said. I have brought a boy out of the Frymen's camp who would have been beaten for spilling a jug, and have placed him at a fire where he was not and then was. I have told my father in a letter that I mean to be my own man. This is all me being clever. He took a breath. Now I mean to be something else. Let me hold a watch. If I am too loud, throw me away. Arthur regarded him. The boy did not look like a boy then. He looked like a man in the moment before he takes a blow and has decided to take it clean. Watch second ring with Tobin, Arthur said. Do not speak unless you must. If you file honest. Perwyn stood like a man told he might live, then bowed because sometimes it is good to bow even among northerners who distrust it. Thank you, he said, and the words were not cheap. That night, Perwyn kept his eyes the way a good man keeps a dog, gentle and firm, with attention and with a willingness to be yanked where he did not expect to go. He missed once, at the beginning, the brush of a vole near his boot, and Hake in the outer ring hissed the warning they had agreed upon, and Perwyn took the correction and made no song. He touched the copper bowl at the bedpost with 2 fingers and his forehead as if he meant it and left no mark. Tobin said nothing to him and then, when the night had turned its blackest, said, You may belong, which is blessing enough in most religions. When the watch ended, Perwyn's shoulders had found a new way to be. Lower, steadier, bearing something. Invisible. Arthur nodded to him when he saw him at dawn, and did not smile because sometimes men need a nod more than a grin. They held themselves taut when Lord Ricard Karstark broke. You can hear it when a man breaks. It is a dry sound first, then an ugly wet one like a reed snapping and then mud sucking at a boot. He had his sorrow wrapped around him like an animal pelt that had not been cured properly. It stank and clung. When news came that the prisoners he had nurtured from his anger lay under his hands cold, and men who had depended on the law for the shape of their days discovered law had been used to make a hole you could fall through, the king's tent became a weather place. Men came and went. The copper bowl at the bedpost was struck too hard once by a wolf in his frustration, and the dent they polished out later never quite smoothed. Even copper remembers insult. Robb took the man's head because it had to be done by a king if it were to have meaning besides blood. He did it without anger and did it without joy, and Caitlin watched with her face the color of meat turned long in brine, and Brynden stood like a hill, and the great John rolled his shoulders as if none of his joints would ever be what they had been. Arthur set the guard in layers tighter than it had needed to be and stood where Robb could see him without wanting to, on purpose, because men need something to set their eyes against when everything in them is breaking. After, when the head lay under shawl and the neck steamed and the world said the old words to itself because men must, Arthur found Robb and the gods would they made for themselves each night wherever they laid their tents. A green place that was not a god's wood but served. Robb had his hands out like a man asking to take a hot pan someone else could not carry any longer. "I did not want to," he said. The words were not for Arthur. They were for the shapes in his head. "I did not want to, and I did not hesitate." "Those truths can live next to each other," Arthur said. "He killed boys," Robb said. "He did," Arthur said. "And he was a friend to my father," Robb said, almost in wonder, as if discovering a new property of stone. "He was," Arthur said. Robb made a sound that could have been laughter if laughter had forgotten the trick of lightness. "Have you ever been right in some way that made you nauseous?" "Yes," Arthur said. "And I have been wrong in ways that made me hungry." Robb wiped his eyes with the heel of his hand, not pretending he had not. "Stand with me," he said, "when everything bends." "I will," Arthur said, and did. The word began to go out after Oxcross that the Wolf King moved like water that has learned the lay of the land, and that he had men around him who moved with him. Tales grew as tales do if you fail to weed them. They said a gray-cloaked woman had taken 3 men in the dark with her hands and then apologized to their gods. They said a fat lord with a hammer had once crushed a helm into a shape like a bowl and then gone to eat from a bowl of the same size without shame. They said a boy with a pike had ears like an owl and stood in the rain for 3 hours without blinking. They said an old man had held 2 ropes in his hands and kept a tent from flying on a night the wind tried to take it, and that the king had slept through that wind as if it were a lullaby because the old man's hands were more sure than weather. They said Arthur Dayne had taken his white and dipped it in ash and wore it like penance. That one made Arthur tired, and he cut it down when he heard it, not because he disliked poets, though he did, but because the men around him needed less burden, not more. "I am working," he told a washerwoman who said it to him shyly that morning while she wrung gray out of clothes with red knuckles. "Nothing more than that." "You look like something more," she said, and smiled without teeth. "I do not eat more," he replied, and handed her a copper without making a show of it. Letters came like birds. One from Winterfell with a handwriting that could have been a child's or a very precise woman's, penned by a castle septon with fancy curlicues because the person dictating had insisted on it being pretty. Sansa's news and fear and careful politeness were there in every word, though she had not been the one to write. The letter was for Robb. Arthur did not read it, but he held it for a while in his hand before he brought it to the king, the weight of it telling him more about what was inside than ink would. He thought of a girl's needles and how they make holes that men pretend they don't feel and make comfort all the same. Robb read it and did not weep because the men around them did not have enough water to share, and the dire wolf put his head on Robb's knee and made a small sound, and Arthur stood a pace away and pretended well that he was thinking of rope lengths and not the way loneliness takes up a little more room in a person each day until it has a chair and a cup of its own. From the west, smoke wrote its selfish little songs against the sky. The Blackfish and Robb more often than not had their heads together, calling weather and men and chance by their false names so they could be lured into closer talk. Arthur sometimes spoke and sometimes did not. When he did, it was to say, "Move a smaller piece," or "That man likes meat too well. He will not risk his belly unless cornered," or "Your right is good if you like clay. Adjust for clay." Brynden would grunt and Robb would huff in a way Catelyn had once told Arthur meant he was thinking hard and did not like it, which satisfied Arthur because men must dislike thinking sometimes or else they are thinking the wrong things. One night, long past midnight, Arthur woke because he had taught himself to wake at noises other men would call silence. His body remembered a tense seems the way other men remember women's bodies. He lifted his head and the dark mo. Ved strangely, and then he realized he was hearing the rain come from too far away to be rain. It came not from above but from a man's lungs near the tent's mouth. The breath had a rattle in it that signaled an old injury flaring like bad weather and bone. He slipped from his pallet and moved to the flap and lifted it the width of a finger. Perwyn stood outside, hood up, still. He had come to stand there because he had heard the rain in his own chest and was ashamed of waking the man he guarded and ashamed of remaining lying down while his ribs fussed in a way that gave the wrong story. He stood like a dog given a pie and told not to eat it and determined to win the impossible game. Arthur liked him a little more for that. He let the flap fall and went back to his pallet without saying a word, because sometimes what a man needs is to be allowed to be good without being seen doing it. He lay and listened until Perwin's breath settled. He swore then, quietly in his head, a soaring profane litany he had learned from Dornish soldiers and improved out of personal pain, not for any moral release but to keep from drifting back into the drowning sort of memory that had sharpened its teeth at his door because the night had let it. On a morning when fog clung stubborn and long and men swore it was a sign of something and then laughed at themselves for making signs out of air, Arthur walked the line of forges, such as they were. He did that because you can know a lot about a man by looking at his tools, and because he needed a small knife's tang fixed. He had offended it against a piece of nail driven where it should not have been, and now it sulked. He found the smith bending over a bar with his tongue out, not unlike a child making careful letters. "Lord Commander," the smith said, looking up and pushing a blackened hand across his brow and leaving a line there he would not see until someone laughed at him later. "Dayne," Arthur said automatically. "Lord Commander is for making men stand straighter. I am not trying to make you stand straighter. I am trying to make you stand as you are and put more work in your hands." He placed the knife and the tang and the story beside it, brief and only honest. The smith understood this language. Men who shape heat play with truth much like soldiers do, burning off the lies as impurities. He nodded and reached. You could tell a Dornsmith by his temper or a Northsmith by his eye. This one had a Riverland's patience that charmed Arthur. The man's movements made a sentence of their own. "We're short on nails," the smith said as the knife heated to the right blush. "Men pull them from the carts without telling me, because they think of small things as if they were free. Men always think nails are born," Arthur said, and reached into a pouch and set 3 small lengths of twisted wire on the table. "Trade me when you can." The smith took the wire and weighed it and nodded. "You were a good steward someplace once," he said. "I have been poor," Arthur said. "It teaches you to count iron." The smith laughed in that quiet way men laugh when they recognize a shape of their own mind in another man's mouth. He did the tang neatly, and Arthur watched, not because he did not trust him, but because it is good to witness work when you can. It makes later asking for more bearable. He took the knife back and slipped it into its home and felt the rightness of it like putting a bone back in a socket. On his way back through the camp, he found a boy trying to lift a sack of salt he could not carry and showed him how to take it on his back with the knot low and the weight on his hips, not his shoulders. He found, a few tents down, a woman arguing with a man over whose turn it was to wait, and came between them with the dispassionate authority of a baker dividing loaves by weight and not pity. He found Hake asleep beneath a cart, mouth open, pike gripped like a lover, and stood over him for a long breath, thinking of boys under carts in other wars. He let the breath go and moved on. There are days in war when no great thing happens. These are the days that make men. The wolves learned how to withstand boredom without self-mutilation. Arthur praised them for that as loudly as he praised them for killing the right men at the right moment. Boredom kills kings. He told them once by a cook fire when the sky had poured a sticky gold over everything and insects had made of themselves an orchestra. Men who cannot bear to be not needed will make themselves needed by breaking things. Don't be that man. If the king sits and sighs and scratches his ankle and looks young and foolish, make soup, make rope, mend, laugh quietly. Guard him from the itch to go do something stupid for the sake of movement. Soup won't stop arrows, Wendell said with a grin. Soup stops men from going where arrows are, Arthur said, and Daisy snorted hard enough to blow a crumb off her lip. Now and then, at dusk, Arthur would take Dawn out and carry her a little way into the edge of the wood where the light became a particular color. Thin blue poured through leaves, and he would unsheath her there as if the wood needed the sound. He never swung her at a tree. He never cut the air for joy. He did not make rituals out of it beyond care, and care is enough of a ritual when done well. He would sit, the blade across his knees, and let his mind set itself down beside the weapon until they both cooled to the same temperature. Once, the dire wolf came and stood with him and put its wide head beside the blade's flat and closed its eyes and made that huffing sound it made, and Arthur put his hand on thick fur, and that moment was almost a prayer without any God in it. He did not keep count of the number of times he caught Bolton's men watching places men do not watch when they mean well. He did not show his awareness like a prize. He added a rule quietly and told the wolves only once. No man with a flayed man on his sea. Loke came within 2 strides of the bedpost copper unless his name had been said aloud by a wolf in that hour, and the name must be correct. Seemed small. Small rules keep fields from flooding. Twice the rule was tested, and twice a man with skin-pale eyes stopped short and smiled without knowing why, and Arthur pretended there had been no moment at all. Later, Daisy would tell him he was the most paranoid person she knew and kiss his cheek and call him a sentimental stump. He would take the kiss and tell her insults were getting worse and she should ask Jaren for lessons. Winter does not announce itself in the north, not really. It settles in men's joints and teaches hounds to curl tighter and makes bread crusts brittle. On a morning when all the tents had fur at their edges and men cursed the leather of their boots for not being as brave as the rest of them, a messenger came from the Riverlands with the kind of news that does not know its own size until men hear it and grow tall under it or shrink. There was talk of Tywin turning, of lines redrawn. There was talk of a marriage bargain at the Twins that had as many strings as a harp. There was talk of ravens and letters and the South playing at kings like boys with sticks in the mud playing at swords. There was talk of a Lannister girl, golden and sad. Arthur heard it and knew what part of it was weather and what part was storm. Robb called council and all the names gathered, and the tent grew hot with breath and cool with envy and worry and hunger. Catelyn's mouth was a knife. The Greyjoy's fists were ham hocks and he thumped them. Bryndon's eyes were older than patience. Bolton said things in his slow way, and Arthur listened to what was not said around them. After the council, Arthur found Robb alone and making the shape of a mistake around his shoulders. Men can look like that, as if error were a shawl they are trying on. "If you want my word, I will give it," Arthur said. "I want it," Robb said. "Then hear it and do not take it as an order," Arthur said. "Do not marry where you sleep to forget blood. Do not marry because it is summer in your bones for a moment. Morning will come. Let your morning be one you can govern." Robb laughed like a young man again before he found himself. "Was I that transparent?" "Yes," Arthur said. "To your mother, to your guard, to any woman who has ever turned a man's face in her hands and made him look at her when he wanted to look at sleep." Robb rubbed his brow with his knuckles. "I will not do anything foolish," he said, "which is a dispatch from a battle one has not yet fought." "Do all your foolishness in the open where someone can fetch you," Arthur said. "If you must." They moved toward Riverrun again because war is a tide among stubborn rocks. Men in red waited to make noises and make men in gray tired. Arthur felt the pace of his heart and liked it for being measured and not heroes fast. He is more used to a king when his own pulse does not believe in songs. One afternoon, passing a village that had died quietly and left only its well and 3 stones to tell it had once been a place, he stopped and drank from the well with the caution of a man who has learned how to listen to water. Tasted clean. He found, under the lip, a bundle, wrapped in oiled cloth, and when he unwrapped it, he found bread not too stale and a small wooden toy horse with 4 crooked legs and a bit of blue ribbon tied round its neck. He wrapped it up again and put it back, after taking 1 slice of bread and leaving 2 coppers. He looked at the sky, then, and spoke a name he had not spoken in years, and the name did not echo but did something else inside him he approved of. That night he sat with Hake and the Barrowton boy and showed them how to mend leather with spit and patience and a bone needle. "War is mostly this," he said. "If you hate this, you should not be soldiers. If you can come to like this, you might live." Hake stuck his finger and did not cry out and wore the pain as if it were a small hat someone had put on his head without asking. The Barrowton boy cursed like a small god and then laughed at himself, which in Arthur's book counted as learning. Through all these days, he kept a piece of chalk and a bit of shale and a leather-wrapped board in his tent. On it, he wrote a list that was not a list meant for anyone else's eyes. 10 quiet rules, 12 when he could bear to admit to 2 more. He wrote them in the plain words of a man who had stopped courting poets. No drinking on the ring. Bread and salt beneath any roof. Always set 2 paths to the king's sleep. Never trust a quiet rope unless you tied it. Trust the man who admits fear over the man who brags courage. Replace what you move. Use the left hand when your right is tired. Wake before your turn sometimes and stare at nothing. When you cannot decide, wash your hands and then decide. Eat, shift, laugh when you mean to. Hold the copper bowl like a heart and not a plate. It is not a holy thing. It is a reminder. He did not show the list to anyone. He did not have to. He taught it by standing where he stood and walking as he walked. On a night when fireflies came late and tired, a singer came into camp with a broken harp and a mouth that could not help but make itself into pleasant shapes. He looked at the gray cloaks and the wolf fur and the glimmer where dawn lay wrapped behind Arthur's shoulder, and he put a song out of his throat without asking. Because singers who see symbols and do not sing of them often die of complications of the liver. He sang of mourning and regret and wolves. He sang badly but with feeling, and Arthur, listening with his head turned to the side as a dog listens to an unfamiliar whistle, found himself not entirely offended. After, the man came to him with his mouth made for coin and his hand empty. Arthur gave him a copper and said, "Sing a song for me." "For you?" The man asked, surprised. "What song?" "A dull one," Arthur said. "Sing about the way a man ties his shoes before dawn and does not think about his name. Sing about soup when it is the only thing between a man and madness. Sing about a boy who wanted to take a ribbon from a man's belt and failed and later lived because of it. Sing about men who do not die because everything that would kill them is bored by their carefulness." "That's not a song," the singer said, flummoxed. "It should be," Arthur said, and the man laughed and sang something silly about a shoemaker's daughter and made the men happy anyway. When the word came of Theon, word that was not word, but the shape of an absence, the way you know a tooth has gone because your tongue goes to a place and finds it not there, Arthur said nothing, and Caitlin said everything without raising her voice. Robb took the letter they wrestled together from rumor and road witness and read it with a patience he had not possessed when Arthur first met him. Then he folded it and unfolded it and laid it down on the map as if it had any business being a piece of a war, which it did. He sat and did not put his head in his mother's lap because he had become the sort of man who no longer did that, and not because he did not wish to. "Do you want to ask me if I am sorry I sent him?" Robb asked at last without looking up. "No," Arthur said. "I would like to ask you if you are still king." Robb's head came up at that, hot. Then the heat sank and left a man's face. "Yes," he said. "Then be king," Arthur said, without noise. The sort of king that makes treachery expensive. Caitlin's eyes were coals. "We will go home and find that home is a word and a place, two different things." "We will," Arthur said, "and we will put one over the other carefully until they learn to match again, or we will decide they cannot and make a new word that fits the place we have." "Do you comfort all your kings this way?" she asked, but there was no mockery in it. "I have had one," he said. "I failed him. I am learning." She looked at him for a long time. Then she called him by his first name for the first time. "Arthur," she said, and it was like a blessing without any priest in it. He slept little in the nights that followed because nights with betrayal in their belly make messes. He walked more and spoke less and oiled his hands too often and taught Hake to listen to owl calls by name and pitched his voice low and sure when he told men where to stand. He polished dawn in the dark. He kept Robb alive. Winter came closer. The wolf's white took on the color of the weather that touched it, and thin ice formed in the pots if you were lazy and did not pour the water out. Arthur took to rising even earlier and heating stones and wrapping one for each wolf in a cloth and putting them into their cold palms before they asked. He did not say anything when he did it. Dacey kissed his cheek once for it and called him nurse. Jaren said, "This is how you keep men from mutiny." Wendell said, "Stone is hungry," and pretended to bite it, and Burren held his earnestly and did not joke because he did not know how to joke by habit yet, only on purpose. They came down at last toward Riverrun in a league of weather that could not decide what to be. Men in trout colors came out to meet them with faces that had learned something since the world first turned wrong. Caitlin's people never looked like they had forgotten the river. It sat in their eyes like a steady coin. Arthur saw the way their hands lay on the hilts they had and the hips that did not. He stood with Robb as a lady would stand with a favorite son in a draft. at his shoulder, ready to shut the door if a gust came. Caitlin went ahead because it was her hall and her father's, and because home is a kind of wound and a salve and she needed to set her body in it. They crossed the drawbridge with a quiet that pleased Arthur. He touched the copper bowl when it was set in its new place, because even in a hall that belonged to Trout it mattered to do the same small things. He looked into the inner doors and judged their weight and their hinges and the men posted there and how their boots had worn the flagstones, and what those wear patterns said about the routes they walked and the ones they avoided. He spoke to the steward with respect and learned where the bent spoon had been left and which scullery maid would tell you the important truths and which would carry your words to the wrong ears. He walked the walls with Brynden when the other man had room for company, and did not fill the air with talk that would make Brynden wish he liked him less. At dinner, he sat 3 places from Robb, not because he was dodge-proud but because the ring demanded a certain geometry. He watched men drink and did not make a show of counting cups. He watched women talk and counted them as if counting geese. He chewed meat and thought of nothing except the taste, because days are made of what you decide to think about when you chew. He caught Roose Bolton watching him not watching Bolton and nodded a fraction. Bolton's mouth did not move, but Arthur imagined it had made a shape that had scarecrow sticks in it and stains. The night after they entered the castle, Caitlin came to Arthur with a ribbon. It was pale blue. It had once been a girl's. It had been tightened once around a wrist or a braid. The crease showed yet. She held it out without speech. He took it without ceremony and tied it in an inside pocket where, if he needed it in a night fight, it would not entangle him, but where, if he needed to find it to put it in a young man's hand to remind him of air and not storm, he could. "Thank you," he said. She looked at him as if he had told a joke. "Do you even know what it is?" "Yes," he said. "It is very heavy." "Good," she said. "Let it be." He slept that night, an hour in a place that had been known to him once, if only as a rumor: Lord's halls, red wine at correct temperatures, goo. "De honey, good floor." He slept without dreams for that hour. When he woke, he rose and took up his watch where it waited, patient, like a dog who knows it will be walked every day by a man who will not praise it overmuch and will not forget it. News of the South's elaborate dance came thick and inexpertly sauced. There were too many kings. There were too many knives. There were boys with names like Springtime and men with names like Storms. The boys died and the storms went on. Somewhere in the telling came word of a girl stabbed by Court, not blade, and a boy with hair like wheat set on a chair too large for him, and a man with a beard like black rope saying justice with a mouth that did not trust the word. Arthur absorbed the words into himself and did not let them make him less useful in the place where he was. If the world fell, he would still have to set the ring and keep the bedpost copper true and make sure soup came hot. He went with Robb to sit with Lord Hoster Tully and listen to a dying man say the things dying men say. Arthur watched Caitlin as she let the man's love hurt her because it is the same thing, and loved her for doing it. He stood by a window that looked down upon water that had a particular speed to it and thought how many times he had stood by windows while men died and how the trick seemed to be in not letting the window teach you to love distance. He put his hand on stone warm from the day and took it away and thought, this is what to be alive is. Jaren came to him one dusk with laughter in his mouth that he had kept out of his eyes because he was trying to be better than he had been. Lord, he said, Wendell has convinced the kitchen to set aside drums for him, and now he frightens soup. Arthur found Wendell at the back of the kitchen with 2 wooden bowls and a grin like a moon. He beat a rhythm not unlike the guard's pattern and made cooks laugh and scold and move with more efficiency than they knew they possessed, because he did the beat with grace. When Arthur stepped in, Wendell stopped, embarrassed, as if he had been found with a woman whose husband had gone to fetch water and returned too quickly. "Carry on," Arthur said, and Wendell carried on, sheepish and pleased, and the soup came out sooner and better for it. The kitchen women to whom kindness comes the way milk comes to cows made little noises that said a person had passed who did not steal from them. Arthur left a copper for flour and a smile he did not know he had until a girl muttered, "He's not scary," and he thought, "I am tired enough to be something different and must sleep soon." He slept, to the sound of Wendell's ghost drums in his dreams, like a man lying on boards and glad to be on boards and not in water. The wolves were not perfect. Jaren quarreled one morning with a man from House Serwyn over a girl who had smiled at both of them as if they were chairs and she was deciding which to sit on. Daisy bloodied a nose over injustice she perceived, not stopping to ask if it had been meant as comedy badly delivered. Burren stared too hard at a man who had insulted Robb in a way that could be read 3 different ways, and then spoke too carefully to make the point that you cannot use a man's mother as a noun where other men can hear it and remain unbloodied. Tobin slept twice, 10 seconds each, during the last watch in a drizzling dawn when the body makes its hardest bargains. Hake dropped his pike and bent for it too quickly and stabbed his boot through, which made him limp, which made him angry, which made him more careful forever after. Arthur collected each of these in his ledger of men. He sanded off the sharpest corners. He did not worry the ones that would serve to cut rope if needed. He made of them a ring that held. He caught Perwin sneaking bread for the Barrowton boy and made him do it with more grace and less risk. He caught the Barrowton boy writing his name with a stick in the mud behind the latrines and brought him chalk and a rail board because names written in filth have a way of staying, and he meant better for the boy. He wrote, each night he could, on his simple board, a line that made of the day something more than sweat. Not pretty lines. Lines like, Perwin did not speak when he did not need to and I would trust him with rain. Or, Daisy's left hand is too quick and if I do not fix it she will break someone she did not need to. Or, Wendell should be encouraged to find better rhythms because these will keep men from hitting each other in the line. Or, Jaren laughed at a joke that was cruel and then stopped, laughed in the middle and turned his head away. Or Burren ate like a man and not a boy. Or once, in a hand that wavered more than he would have liked. Robb smiled in his sleep and did not wake sad. Men come to love their work when they do it side by side with other men who love it. That is an old truth. The wolves loved their work. They loved the smallness of it. They loved the way it fit. They loved the way a ring around a breathing boy made the world containable. They loved the way strangers looked twice and then settled. They loved being laughed at by cooks and kissed by girls and scowled at by lords and thanked by nobody in particular. They loved the aches that came in the right places. They loved soup at 2 in the morning. They loved the copper bowl and the sound it made when tapped lightly and the way the sound carried through fabric and reminded a man of his place in air. Arthur kept the list and kept the rhythm and kept the boy. He kept being quiet when men wanted to praise him loudly, because loud praise makes enemies and quiet work makes a path. He kept the ghost weights balanced and allowed them to pull now and then so he would not forget them and call the forgetting virtue. He kept the dawn in his pocket as a wrapped blade and never cut the day with it unless he had to. He kept love in his mouth like a pebble and turned it with his tongue, finding the smoothness and the rough and the way it helped speaking. He kept watch. When at last word came that the path forward toward alliance and marriage and blood was a cloth woven of nettle and silk, Arthur did what he had to do. He polished his boots because men trust men with clean boots. He set the ring twice. He checked the hinges. He walked the hall where bread and salt would be offered and looked at the table with a carpenter's eye. He tasted a pinch of salt and found it clean. He had wine tasted and poured out twice, then refilled until the near cup and the far were the same wine. He told Robb to smile once and let the smile fall all the way to his eyes and then hold very still. He told Daisy to keep her hands open. He told Tobin to look bored. He told Wendell to pretend to count loaves in his head and then miscount and smile at the mistake. He told Jaren to watch the corners. He told Burren to watch Jaren. He told Perwin to eat the bread he was given and to swallow it visibly. He told Hake to stand at the outer ring and listen to the way the door says men's names when it opens and closes. Hake laughed, not unkindly, because he had learned that men sometimes speak in puzzle because they do not have a better way or because puzzle keeps fear busy while sense works. The world turned and men came in and made their usual small, stupid mistakes and sometimes their large, stupid ones. Arthur could not fix all of them. He did not try. He fixed what he could reach with the tools he had. A dull knife, a bowl of soup, a hand on a shoulder, a nod across a room, a quiet word, a line written and wiped away in the morning. He stood beside Robb while men said the things men say when they are making bargains and hoping gods they don't believe in are listening. He listened to the scrape of chair legs and the sigh of a fire and the way bread breaks in cold hands. He listened to salt. He listened for the small, deliberate wrong sound that tells you the world has decided to do a bad thing. He heard only the ordinary wrongness of men trying to be grand and stumbling over their own feet. He thought, with astounding simplicity, I am alive, and the boy next to me is alive, and my work is to keep making these two sentences true for as long as the world will let me. Then he put his hand to the copper bowl and tapped it, once lightly, and the sound went around the room like a small, decent bell, and he believed, for the space of that sound, that it might be possible.